It's back on the road for Stephen Mulhern and in for a penny at 7 o'clock. But now, it's the STV News.
Good evening from Edinburgh. Nicola Sturgeon is First Minister and her party will stay on for an historic fourth term in government, following a second day of counting in the Holyrood election. But the SNP seem unlikely to have an overall majority. Here's our political correspondent, Ewan Petrie.
The following candidate is duly elected to serve as a member of the Scottish Parliament for the Aberdeenshire West constituency. That is Alexander Burnett, Scottish Conservative and Unionist Party.
This seat was key to the SNP's drive for an outright majority. Victory for the Conservatives ended that hope.
This seat has been a target seat for the SNP since back in 2016. It was the only seat they didn't win, and they've been after it ever since, and no more so than when they wanted to try and get that majority. So if we're the seat that stopped the SNP getting the majority, then that makes this win here even better.
The Conservatives also held another SNP target in Galloway and West Dumfries, also with an increased majority. In Glasgow, Cocab Stewart won Glasgow Kelvin for the SNP, becoming the first woman of colour to be elected to the Scottish Parliament.
There are many barriers that people like myself have to go through, but at the end of the day, our voice in the Scottish Parliament is just as important, because actually we care about loads of issues, not just sort of like traditional issues that you might connect with minority communities.
Nicola Sturgeon described her party's victory as extraordinary and historic, adding voters had backed a second independent referendum.
There is simply no democratic justification whatsoever for Boris Johnson, or indeed for anyone else seeking to block the right of the people of Scotland to choose our own future. And let me be very clear about this. If the Tories make such an attempt, they won't be placing themselves in opposition to the SNP. They will be standing in direct opposition to the will of the Scottish people.
The Prime Minister described another referendum as irresponsible and reckless, signalling the upcoming clash between Holyrood and Westminster over the Constitution.
I hope the SNP do look at what the public have been saying, which is absolutely on Nicola Sturgeon's timescale. It would be the wrong thing to take Scotland back to the division of the past. We should actually just be focused on uniting our country to secure our recovery.
On the regional lists in central Scotland, Labour and the Conservatives won 3 seats each, while the Greens picked up 1. In the Highlands, Labour were down to 1 seat, along with the SNP and Greens, while the Conservatives picked up 4. A pro-independence majority in the Parliament raises the question of a formal coalition.
My guess is that the Party Council would be willing to talk and to explore what the options are, but would be concerned about some of the big differences in policy.
The makeup of the next Scottish Parliament is slowly becoming clearer. The celebrations are already underway for some, although the final result will only be known when the remaining regional lists are declared this evening. Ewan Petrie, STV News.
Our political editor, Colin MACKAY, outlines what happens next.
The votes have been cast and counted, and now as the dust settles on the Scottish Parliament election, we can start to look ahead. There's big questions now. What will the SNP do? They didn't manage to get a majority. Will they consider a coalition with the Greens, using that independence majority in the Scottish Parliament, not just for another independence referendum, but to get all their legislation through, some from both parties there? That's a big question mark for the next few days. The Greens have already said that they're open to talks about that. That could create a new dynamic for another independence referendum with that independence majority, but the Conservatives will be elated that after a weekend of counting the votes, that the SNP haven't got the majority. They've denied the single party majority there, which means that they can continue their opposition to another independence referendum. A poor result for Labour, but not as poor as they had expected, although it is their worst in the Scottish Parliament. So what have we got immediately? Well, the MSPs will be gathering in the Scottish Parliament next week. The First Minister will make another statement on lockdown and the recovery in the next few days, and then the MSPs will elect a new presiding officer on Friday.
And that's all from STV News this evening. Bernard Ponsonby and Colin will be here tomorrow evening at 5:30 with an STV News election special. Until then, thanks for watching. Enjoy the rest of your weekend.